Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, we are so happy to have as our guest premier researcher, Dr. Matt Youssef. And we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic called zombie cell elimination. Dr. Matt is with the Institute on the Biology of Aging and Metabolism, Department of Biochemistry, Molecular Biology, and Biophysics at the University of Minnesota. And he has published more than 30 scientific research publications with a heavy emphasis on cellular senescence and aging. His latest study was published in 2021 in the journal Science, extremely prestigious journal. And that shows that aging cells exacerbate COVID-19, which may explain why older populations struggle with recovery from the virus. He serves on the Scientific Advisory Board for SRW Laboratories. And if you visit our archives, we have links so that you can learn more about what goes on at SRW Laboratories and more about Dr. Matt. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Ellen, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Let's go back in time and tell us what led you to a career in science.
So it started out, I wasn't a very good baseball player in high school, and I needed to sort of figure out something to do with my life. And science was sort of a natural aptitude that I had, and really got interested in science sort of altruistically, also just really wanted to help people too and try to make a difference. So that's kind of what led me to it.
And you've come a long way because you've actually, have your PhD. Is that in biology?
Yes, it is. It's actually really in, the standard term is biomedical sciences, but it's in DNA repair.
DNA repair. Now that is a major hot topic. So I bet something else you could discuss with us is telomeres, which
Sure.
is, all kinds of a rage of a topic. But I think the term telomere, when we're talking about products, and I imagine you would agree, a lot of products claim to extend telomeres, but, there's really no science backing that up. They're using it almost more like a marketing term.
It really is, and it should be studied that telomere length is important, and we know that telomeres are sort of like the ends of our shoelaces that have the protective plastic capping on them. They sort of break down with time, and really what's important is not your telomere length at any one time, but really longitudinally knowing throughout your life, the rate of shortening. To me, that's more important than the length at any one point in time.
Well, now let's talk about zombie cells, because that might be a brand new term to a lot of people. And the name of our show is Zombie Cell Elimination Improves Healthspan. So Dr. Matt, tell us what zombie cells are.
So zombie cells are sort of the common name that we use for a cell type called senescent cells. And senescent cells are something that sort of tracks with aging. And what it is typically a normal cell becomes stressed, and it can become stressed from either intrinsic processes, which are occurring inside the cell, or extrinsic from the outside. So it could even be that cells are becoming senescent through metabolic processes that just naturally occur in the cell, or through, say, extrinsic or exterior processes like irradiation, chemical exposure, things like that. And it's this cell fate where the cell no longer divides. And so really it's an evolved anti-cancer response, which, yay, that's great. We're not getting cancer. You're sort of stopping a cell from becoming a cancer cell. And as we've gone to live longer and longer, we've seen that these senescent cells accumulate in our body. And it turns out that while they no longer divide, they're still metabolically active, and they're pretty nasty. They kind of produce a lot of inflammatory trash that can disrupt tissue homeostasis. So really tissue function, repair, and regeneration. And this can actually contribute to the aging process. And so really we sort of thought these zombie cells just accumulated with aging. They were sort of byproducts or passengers of it, but they actually turned out to be drivers of it, and they're really insidious. And so over the past decade and a half, there's been a lot of great science and animal studies to show that this is actually the case. And now we're learning more and more that the senescent or zombie cells are involved in a number of chronic conditions. So type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, chronic kidney disease. And we're really trying to understand more about them, how they arise, and what they're doing to the rest of our body as a whole.
See, and although, Dr. Matt, that is very highly evolved and well-researched and ongoingly researched scientific knowledge, it really relates a lot to aspects in holistic medicine, which I've been involved with since 1964, to where we're less interested, let's say, in specific diagnostic codes, because just what you're saying is what goes on. When there's a breakdown, it's systemic. So when we look at things that help, for instance, with zombie cells, and I'm not sure this is the right term, would they be deactivated or not produced in the first place? Or how can we control them so they cause less of the deleterious effects on various organ systems?
So I want to answer that, but I want to first go back to your holistic approach. And there's this concept called the geroscience hypothesis, and it sort of states that currently we're sort of treating diseases in a silo.
Hold on. I want you to repeat that, because I never heard that term, and I love new terms.
Okay, so it's called the geroscience hypothesis.
Okay.
And the hypothesis states that instead of treating the age-related diseases individually, how about we treat the root causes of these age-related disease, which is aging?
Yeah. And really in natural, that's exactly it. We're looking for root cause all the time in functional medicine.
And so we have these pillars of aging, and cellular senescence, or these zombie cells, being one of them. So if we can treat, or if we can eliminate these zombie cells, what does it have an effect probably on these age-related conditions, and more than once at the same time? And it may be a way that actually would allow us to eliminate, some of the effects of polypharmacy.
And that's another problem, because the polypharmacy originates because it's symptom-based, and it's based on repressing symptoms, but it doesn't go so deep as to look at how could we, for instance, reduce the zombie cells or some other aspect that has a wide range of effects on many different aspects in the physiology. So that's so interesting to me. Geroscience hypothesis really is moving more towards what we've always been doing in functional medicine. So that's exciting to think that would happen. I got a blood test last week, which is called a NutriVal, and that actually went into the Krebs cycle and exactly where I might have missing components, which wouldn't manifest as a symptom until perhaps years from now. But that seems like such a wiser way, and should be based on science like you do, and really incorporated into mainstream medicine.
Yeah, and I think that we have to think about it as this, that molecular changes predate physiological changes, which predate pathology.
That's a good way to put it. Exactly.
It's sort of the molecular changes are really the first link in the chain.
Well, I want to remind our listeners that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse. And today, my guest is Dr. Matt Youssef. He says it better than me, so we're calling him Dr. Matt. And he is actually a renowned scientist at the Institute on the Biology of Aging and Metabolism, and has published many studies. Now, it's interesting that your latest study actually was looking at very big topic right now, which is COVID-19. And of course, will also relate to how well you ward off other kinds of viruses and illnesses. And you actually looked at the fact that these cells can actually exacerbate COVID-19, which may be part of the explanation about why elder people seem to succumb to it more often.
Sure. So we know that these senescent or zombie cells, they accumulate in our body with age, both chronological as well as biological age. So as you hit more of a disease state, you tend to have more of these cells and they can exacerbate the conditions. And so we had this idea that basically these senescent cells are primed for inflammation, because what came out of COVID was there was this concept called the cytokine storm. And these are these naturally inflammatory molecules that are part of the normal immune response, but they sort of get turned up to 11 in COVID. And it sort of caused these deleterious responses and poor outcomes. And what we saw was that these zombie cells were really primed and ready to go. And they produced even more of the inflammatory factors than the non-senescent or non-zombie or normal cells. And, this was what was leading to poor outcomes. And so using an animal model of beta coronavirus infection, we treated these mice with a class of drugs called senolytics. And they're basically there to selectively eliminate senescent cells. And one of these senolytics is a natural product, a polyphenol flavonoid called fisetin. And fisetin is found in fruit and vegetable peels, particularly in strawberries. And what we saw was that it eliminated or reduced the senescent cell burden in the mouse and increased survival.
So like we often, say in terms of animal models, they're excellent, but just because something, and would eating strawberries give one enough fisetin? And is it translatable into human physiology?
It's definitely translatable into human physiology. Currently, fisetin is in a number of human clinical trials for frailty as well as COVID-19. And I believe there's another one for osteoarthritis. Unfortunately, you'd probably go broke and you'd get sick and tired of consuming strawberries. There's not enough fisetin in those strawberries to give you the biological benefit. Really, to sort of achieve that biological benefit, you're going to have to do it through supplementation.
So they take strawberries. Now, I'm interested, and you may not have done research on this yet, but it would be interesting to see if there's a different fisetin ratio in, let's say, organic strawberries versus inorganic strawberries, because in particular, as a subset of fruit, they are one of the most highly sprayed with all kinds of pesticides and herbicides versus the organic strawberries. And they do say that when they evaluate for nutrition, the organic often comes out higher, but I'm not sure they've ever looked at fisetin in particular.
Yeah, I don't know the comparative analysis in plants. So I currently serve as scientific advisor to SRW Laboratories, Scientific Research Wellness Laboratories. And they have a supplement that I sort of serve as the scientific advisor for that has fisetin in it. And to my knowledge, they get theirs from the smoke tree, which probably much more enriched for it than, say, something like strawberry.
Okay, and that's true, because all of these components, when they're in nature, do often exist in several places. Like we always see resveratrol being shouted out from the grape, but really in industry, they're from Japanese knotweed, which is Polygonum cuspidatum. So although they talk about it in terms of something people may recognize as a grape, you can't get a high enough concentration. But that's probably what they found with the fisetin, that it's either more bioavailable or a higher concentration in a tree rather than strawberries, but it's also in strawberries, so people can relate to that concept.
Correct. I don't consume a lot of smoke tree, but I feel better about consuming strawberries now just knowing they have fisetin in them.
Yeah, me too. Ever since I first got I've also been giving them more to my mom. Of course, I make sure they're organic, which also tastes better. But I'm just throwing out this question. Who knows? If you get more research grants, it would be interesting to see if the concentration is influenced by the kind of fruit or tree that it's actually extracted from. So that's wonderful. Now, another one that I see that you've looked at in terms of zombie cell elimination is olive leaf, and in particular, oleuropein.
Yeah, so oleuropein is another compound that's found in olive leaves that's looked at for senescent cell removal, as well as autophagy, and it's another natural product.
Wait a minute, what's autophagy?
So autophagy is the way for the cell to sort of recycle proteins to break them back down to the amino acids and reuse them. And it's sort of, clearing up the junk or damaged proteins.
That's great. See, I've loved having you on as a guest, Dr. Matt, because, and my job is to kind of bring that language down a little bit so our listeners can understand. But at the same time, you've used several terms that I never heard of, which is part of the fun for me of doing this radio show, which I have been doing since this show, 1990. So it's been a little while, and that's absolutely excellent. So it acts as, and then we also talk a lot in natural medicine about cleansing, even through fasting and juicing and herbs that actually upregulate the P450 liver enzymes. But you don't hear that discussed too much in mainstream.
No, and autophagy is still, it's one of the newer pathways of aging, but it's really important. It's sort of the in-house recycling program. And so that becomes dysregulated with aging. And it's one of those things that, we want to keep going throughout life.
And so something like oleuropein may help with that. I use that a lot. I use olive leaf extract that is standardized to a particular percentage of oleuropein very often, both in adults, but also in children, because it's very mild, and something that I might use oil of oregano, which is a very concentrated oil that actually has more possible negative effects, such as burning membranes. I've seen it cause blisters. So with those people that are more sensitive, I may use olive leaf, and it also has antimicrobial effects.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and it's nice. It's easy to sort of access, and it's one of the easier natural products to find that, has been shown to have some regulation of the autophagy process.
So there's so much that we can do. And, certainly when you talk about excess weight, that seems to up the ante in terms of these things occurring. Why is it linked to that?
Excess weight tends to, we see this even in animals. So animals on high-fat diet, not only, are they increasing body fat, they're typically losing lean mass, their physical performance metrics decline, but they have this really inflammatory phenotype. It typically is caused by the fat cells. And, that's why type 2 diabetes can lead into metabolic syndrome. And there's been, work in the senescence field showing that senescent cells can help to drive this metabolic syndrome, the really hyperinflammatory syndrome, and that use of things like senolytics can reduce some of that phenotype or those effects and improve some of the disease in the mouse or in any of the animal models.
Right. And I've seen a lot of studies looking at life extension that's linked to caloric restriction. And those are really vivid when you look at particularly the animal studies, the mice that have been kept on a low-calorie diet, and they look so much younger after their normal lifespan, while the old mouse looks all fat and fluffy and, has joint pain and everything else. So it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And then, the work has also showed too that there is a certain point, an inflection point where the percent of caloric restriction no longer matters. So,
Oh, wait a minute. What do you mean by that? Tell us more about that.
In some of the animal studies, there's sort of a point of maximal benefit where more caloric restriction doesn't mean more biological benefit.
Well, at some point you die, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, it's something for people just to think about, because some people, a little bit is good, then a lot must be great, right? So, and biology is really tightly regulated things. And there's a concept in all of medicine called a therapeutic window, where if there's too little of something, there's not an effect. And if there's too much of an effect, or there's toxicity. And that sweet spot is what's called the therapeutic window.
That makes sense. And I do want our listeners to know that you won the Aging Cell Best Paper Award in 2020. So you're someone who really is on the cutting edge of research. And I know you've used these terms interchangeably during our show today, but senescent cell and zombie cell is the same, correct?
Yes,
everything that you were talking about.
It's just a fun name that we call them, because these senescent cells, they're resistant to cell death. And so that's why we call them zombie cells, because they'll just persist.
So what do
So-
they have that makes them be able to persist? That would be interesting to investigate.
So while they don't proliferate, grow, and divide like a cancer cell would, they activate certain pathways. And these pathways are called anti-apoptotic pathways. And so they basically activate things that make them resistant to cell death.
So
to
things
allow them to
that would
survive.
normally, let's say, white blood cells that might see them and break them down and things like that, they're able to resist.
Yeah, so they activate intrinsic mechanisms that would keep them from sort of internally trying to die. They normal cells, when they become damaged or dysfunctional, they have things on their cell surface, sort of eat me signals for the immune system to sort of consume them and get rid of them in what's called immunosurveillance. Well, the senescent cells will secrete enzymes that will shed those molecules off of the exterior of the cell, sort of camouflaging and hiding from that.
And when were these discovered?
So senescent cells were actually first discovered in the 1960s by Leonard Hayflick and Paul Moorhead. And they were looking at really senescent cells that arose from what we talked about before, telomere shortening.
So this isn't a brand new concept.
It is not a brand new concept at all, but we didn't know that they were really drivers of aging until about a decade ago.
And even then, what I find, and it's almost like when we start to get this scientific knowledge, very often it seems that unless there is a specific drug that could be recommended for this action, you don't get a lot of research dollars into developing it. That's a problem that I think is a part of all of, medicine.
Mm-hmm. And then even more, the field of senolytics, or, the selective compounds or molecules to eradicate the senescent or zombie cells, that's only 7 years old.
Oh.
Which is, in the therapeutic world, that's an infant, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And another of these isolates that I don't know if this is your work or you certainly know about it is actually something that is found in chamomile tea.
Oh, apigenin, right? So it's apigenin is another molecule that is used to help with the maintaining levels of NAD. And NAD is sort of all the rage these days. It's an important cofactor for a number of enzymes and enzymatic processes in the cell body, and we know that it decreases with age. And if we can supplement, NAD levels could extend Healthspan, so disease-free survival. It can improve different disease conditions.
So it seems like these things should be used, I think, in conventional medicine, especially because with the deep science that you and other researchers are doing, we know it is something that can be helpful. But in addition, the adverse effect profile is extremely low. You can't say non-existent because anybody could be allergic to olive,
Sure.
But it's such a minor adverse effect next to what we see with some of these targeted pharmaceuticals that it seems like much more research dollars should be put into developing it and making it more widely available.
I completely agree.
Well, now I know in SRW Laboratories, I did take a look at their website, and people can find the link to it. It's sciencesearchwellness.com, and there's a page about you there, Dr. Matt, and other researchers that they have on board. But one of the things that I saw on their page that they discussed is the use of various herbal extracts. And I believe I saw something there on astragalus, because these are all herbs also. If you think about strawberries and the smoke tree and olive leaf and chamomile, we're talking natural products.
Yeah, I think it seems to me that when I initially got involved with SRW Laboratories, I met Greg McPherson, who's the founder, and he's really dedicated to using natural products in the supplement form to really help people, to give them optimum health, but he wants to do it in a way that is really grounded in the science. And that's what sort of impressed me about it, and that he wants to get sort of key opinion leaders in the field to help them evaluate the science, that they're using the right molecules, they're using in the right combinations. And it's not sort of hocus pocus. It's really well thought out, put together, and driven by the science and the data. And that to me really impresses me and made me want to sort of work with him in the context of being a scientific advisor. Because ideally, we like to translate what we learn at the bench top to, you could say bedside or in this case, for healthy aging or the welderly, the bed table.
Oh, wait, a new word, welderly?
Yeah.
What does that mean? I never heard that before.
So think about it.
I'm that. I would say I'm that. Okay.
Yeah, I think we all hope to be that the welderly is, maybe we can't stop the aging process, but you want to age in the most healthy way possible, where for as long as you can, you want to maintain this concept of Healthspan. And Healthspan is disease-free survival. So, if we can make you only age in the most compressed fashion of possible. So if you were only going to live to 85, but you really don't have a functional decline until 83 and a half, sort of that's when the wheels fall off. That would be great, right? You have these 83 and a half years of healthy lifestyle, healthy functionality, and we try to compress those last years of life where the aging or the disease is manifesting.
Yeah, and I've seen that.
String it out from 60, right?
It's true. And on another show, perhaps we can go into more how you can make that happen. I feel very lucky genetically. My dad, 94, running around, no glasses, no hearing aids, no cane, driving, drinking, doing everything, beating everybody at pool that day, come home, drop dead. Yes, no aging. No aging, just
exactly.
Drop dead.
Yeah. Or you skydiving accidents. So
yeah, these kind of things. I mean, it's really exciting to know that it's not just luck, that you can, the gene part is luck. You have to choose the right parents to get that part. But then there's so much else, like your research discovers, Dr. Matt, that we can take action on to move into a deeper health span lifestyle. So I want to thank you so much for being our guest today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you want to learn more about me or these products, go to the SRW Laboratories website, srw.co, and you can find out more about them. And I think zombie cells are coming into the rage. I think it's something that's going to take off, where it's in clinical trials and we're using natural products. And so it's something for people to keep an eye on, and I find it to be a really interesting space.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.